the finance report. We will now move on to law and licensing. I just moved my papers, so Board Chair Lear. Board Member Lear, are you there?
I am. I
Okay.
Unmute myself. I was talking to myself.
Well, I hope it was a good conversation.
It was. Everybody agreed with me. That's pleasant. We have item 10.2, data sharing agreement amendment. After some discussion, a little of it beside the point, the committee moved that the board approve the amendment to the data sharing agreement between the Utah State Board of Education and the Department of Workforce Services.
Thank you. The motion before us is that the committee moves that the board approve the amendment to the data sharing agreement between the Utah State Board of Education and the Department of Workforce Services. Is there any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, please vote. Vice Chair Davis, I see that's unanimous.
Great.
Thank you.
Item 10.3, discussion of a board policy 3006, data governance plan and its amendment, proposed amendment. And I might need a little help with this, maybe seeing the chart that was involved. Does that make sense to you, Angie, who's driving?
Yes, just give me a moment and I will pull it up.
Okay.
I'm almost there.
Sorry, yeah, I just think, I mean, I could just say the words, but this will really give you a substantive understanding of what you're voting on. So the committee discussed this particular chart and a change to how the board considers contracts and agreements. Do you want to explain the nature of that, Angie? You'll probably do a more succinct job than I will. If that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, yes, go ahead, Angie. It looks like Angie's absent.
No, I'm here. I just can't start my video, so I will just verbally. Or you'll just hear me verbally is what I meant to say. This is Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy. So the committee considered two drafts of this board policy. This is draft one that I'm displaying right now, which is the draft that the committee approved. And really the only difference between the two drafts is the information right here. Under draft one, these types of requests will be approved by the Coordinator of Data and Statistics and the Chief Privacy Officer, which are currently Aaron Bruff and Whitney Phillips. Draft two would have these requests go to the Law and Licensing Committee first and then approved by the board. So that's the difference between the two drafts, is really just whether this is approved by staff or whether it goes to the Law and Licensing Committee and then to the board.
And I don't want to misstate, Angie, but it's true that those kinds of agreements and the provisions in those agreements are required. There isn't flexibility in the provisions in those kinds of agreements. Is that right?
Yes. Sorry, Chair Belknap, would you like me to
go ahead, Angie?
Yes, this is an example of things that, for example, are required by code, where we are to share data with an entity like DWS. And really, we're talking about the agreement on how those data will be handled, stored, protected. What we found with the last couple of agreements that were, the current practice is for them to be placed on the consent calendar, as you might know. And we've had a couple pulled from the consent calendar with an expectation of changing things that really belong in either statute or board rule, meaning they're things that would govern the LEA's practice or notification of parents, et cetera. And so I think that the reason the committee chose to go to this direction is because often the questions that board members have aren't about agreement about how the data are handled, but more about different things that whoever is collecting the data on the front end, how they might be providing notice to parents, families, et cetera, which generally belong or would need to be amended in a board rule or statute, not in a data sharing agreement. That's just kind of a snapshot of the committee's discussion and why I understood they chose draft one.
Thank you. And with that, the motion to the board is the committee moves that the board approve policy 3006, data governance plan draft 1.
The motion before the board is the committee moves that the board approve policy 3006, data governance plan draft 1. Discussion to that motion, board member Earl.
Yeah, I'm just seeking a little bit of clarification. So that this would not come before us at all. In other words, the sharing of data would not be made public in this capacity unless people went to look for it. Is that accurate, or they went to our site on data sharing based on this motion?
That is, or that may answer. Kate.
Yes, go ahead.
That is correct. These data requests would be approved by staff, similar to some of these others you can see are approved by staff or board leadership.
Okay, and so when it's talking about an internal data request, anything from Workforce Services or Utah Department of Health or anything like that would be considered internal? That wouldn't be external?
Board member Vilna.
Go ahead, Angie.
No, that's not exactly correct. There's a difference between something that a law requires us to share with DWS, where a law says, board, you shall provide these data to DWS or to the Department of Health. If DWS, that would fall under this category. If DWS wanted new data from us that had nothing to do with a requirement in statute or board rule, that's something that either the legislature or you all hadn't already approved, that would be an external request. So DWS would be, say, requesting, I'm trying to think what they might request.
Well, the thing that just got passed, the last data sharing item, because it was a change in the data they needed, would that be considered? The item just barely before this is, you are correct. That one did fall under this item here because it's something we're required to share, but the agreement needed to be updated. And I don't know if Whitney Phillips is on and if she'd like to provide more context, but my understanding is that the last agenda item, so this data sharing agreement right here, is required, and this one is probably, I'm trying to look, is maybe required by the federal government or required as a condition of this program. It's not necessarily something DWS is asking for, outside of a requirement in the law. So, but that's my understanding, is that yes, this one would now fall under right here.
So Angie, can I put this in Laura terms?
Yes.
Because I call these baby terms, that if it's required in statute or rule, then we can't really say no to it anyway, unless we change rule or we change statute. And so that we're having it done internally.
Yes, and I would just add, or a federal program.
Our federal program. Thank you, Angie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Jenny, your hand's still up. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm pondering if I have another question.
Okay.
And I know there's places, and I don't know if Whitney's on or not, but
And I guess this does go back to the concern that how do people know their data is not being shared, right? And that's the continued concern, is it's exchanged between entities. And so there's that concern that people sign up for something, free and reduced lunch, and their data is shared with others. And I know it says services on there because I know you had this discussion, Chair Lair, so I do apologize for repetition here, but I think, yeah, maybe it needs to be maybe we need to consider policy or something on that to make sure there's knowledge what that sharing is for people that are signing up for these programs, just making sure that's clear. So, okay, thank you. Thanks for letting me baby talk it out.
Me who needs baby talking now.
Chair
Okay.
Belknap?
Yes.
May I just wanted to also bring to your attention, Board Member Earl, that you can see here on page 6, just a little bit above where I was showing earlier, the definition of internal data requests. So it's right here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Okay,
Yes.
Angie, will you pull the motion back up again for me?
Should be there now. Please. It is on my screen. I apologize if it hasn't flipped
Yeah, it's not.
yet.
There we go.
Okay.
So the motion before the board is that the committee moves that the board approve policy 3006, data governance plan, draft 1. Please vote. There it is. I see that everyone has voted with 1 no vote by Board Member Earl. Board Vice Chair, you're good with that, Vice Chair Davis?
Yes, but I lost a couple.
Yeah, I saw them all come up eventually. Yeah, okay, Chair Lear.
Item 10.4 is a discussion of R277-614, athletes and students with head injuries and the proposed amendment. The committee moves that the board approve R277-614, athletes and students with head injuries, draft 1 on second and final reading.
Thank you. The committee moves that the board approve R277-614, athletes and students with head injuries, draft 1 on second and final reading. Any discussion to that motion? Board Member Cannon.
Thank you. I just am wondering if Utah High School Activities also has a policy on head injuries that may occur during extracurricular sports.
Board Member Straight, do you know that at this time?
The answer is yes, both from a matter of being a head high school coach and as well as going through all those protocols, as well as having a child who had to go through those protocols. So it is well established. Head injuries is well established.
Yeah, thank you, Board Member Cannon. And actually, it is in their policy. I've read it, and maybe Board Member Straight, in all his many months of service, hasn't had opportunity to read that yet. So, sorry, Board Member Straight, to put you on the spot there. Okay, so the policy, the motion before the board is that the committee moves that the board approve R277-614, athletes and students with head injuries, draft 1 on second and final reading. Please vote. Board Member Moss. Hold on a minute. Board Member Moss. I don't see that he's here, nor has he voted. So Lorraine, it's unanimous with Board Member Moss not here. Oh, there he is. He's come back. It's unanimous. Thank you, Jim. Okay, Chair Lear.
Item 10.5, discussion of R277-325, public education exit and engagement surveys. And the committee moves that the board approve R277-325, Public Education Exit Engagement Surveys Draft 1 on second and final reading.
So the motion before the board is that the committee moves that the board approve R277325, Public Education Exit and Engagement Surveys Draft 1 on second and final reading. Any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, please vote. Okay, it looks like the vote is unanimous. Do you see anything different, Vice Chair Davis?
Nope, it looks unanimous to me.
Thank you.
It looks like board
Board
member
member,
hands staying
yeah,
up.
Board Member Moss, do you have a question? No, okay. I think he voted with his hand this time. So, all right, Chair Lear.
Moving rapidly to item 10.6, R277-301, Educator Licensing Amendment. This was a discussion of a couple of, obviously, amendments to this primarily general licensing rule. And I was frantically, well, I'll just say this first. I'd like to make an amendment on my own behalf to this rule or to this proposed amendment.
Will you read out the rule first?
Yeah,
Carol?
that's what I'm asking.
Okay.
You didn't let me get the words out. Yes.
Sorry.
Was asking how to do it. Let's propose what the committee proposed. The committee moves the board approve R277-301 Educator Licensing Draft 2 on second and final reading.
Okay, the committee moves that the board approve R277-301 Educator Licensing Draft 2 on second and final reading. Any discussion to that motion? This would be you, Board Member Lear.
Oh, I have an amendment to that motion that was
That would
just
be appropriate.
brought to my attention by a couple of HR directors. And I think their proposed change is a very good one in the spirit of local control and maximum flexibility in this difficult era and this difficult area. So my proposed amendment is to delete one of the changes on lines 290 through 292, where it would prohibit, I'll explain the amendment later, but that would be my proposed amendment to delete lines 290 through 292.
Okay, can we just take a minute so everyone can read those and then we'll come back?
But it doesn't seem like this is the new language.
Board Member Belknap and Board Member Lear, may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Are you amending draft 3, Board Member Lear, or draft 3? And the reason I ask is I understood that draft 3 might have also been drafted in response to requests by the HR directors. So I'm wondering, are you wanting to amend lines 290 and 291 of draft 2 or 290 and 291 of draft 3?
Of draft 2. That's why this looks.
And so draft 3 has already incorporated her changes, Angie?
No, it hasn't.
Okay.
I just want to make it clear, though, that I do believe that the HR directors also want draft 3. So I didn't know if you wanted to make that motion to draft 3, but I will go ahead and draft it.
I was making it
draft
to draft 2. I can find the change.
Let's look at draft 2, Angie.
Okay.
Okay, and then see if those are the lines, and then we can reconnoiter back to the lines she would like to amend. Okay.
All right, yeah, it's the same. In draft 2, it's 290 through 292, where the concern was raised. To me, can't speak for all HR directors, but to a couple of HR directors. And I would propose deleting those lines so that prohibition was no longer there.
Okay, so Angie, how does this relate to draft 3? And what is different in draft 3 other than this piece?
So that Malia could chair, is it okay if Malia Height answers?
No, we can't have Malia do that. Go ahead, Malia.
Thank you so much, Chair. Malia Height, Educator Licensing Coordinator.
There are a couple of differences between draft 2 and draft 3. The substantive difference in draft 3 is that the language around the associate license for special education needed a new location so that the intended changes actually worked and there wasn't a contradiction between two parts of the rule. So this part that Board Member Lear is addressing here is some feedback that I got from the field related to educators. The concern is around educators who are no longer active and are returning to the field. And what kind of options do LEAs have to ensure that those educators can be licensed? And in speaking with HR directors as well as Superintendent Dixon, we discussed not only is the new renewal rule sufficiently broad to help those educators renew their professional level license, but also we are looking to find a greater flexibility within the renewal rule, and I'm working currently with HR directors on that language and have been meeting with some this week regarding that change.
Okay, so if I can try and put all of this together, in draft 3, Angie, is this information, lines 290 to 292, taken out? Okay, so if we need to adopt draft 3 so that we get the SPED thing in order, where are these lines in draft 3? Carol, are you with me?
I am.
Okay, so is this draft 3? Is this draft 3 now?
No.
So Carol, may I make the assumption you'd like to have lines 306 to 308 taken out of draft 3?
That's right.
And are you okay with the switching around? Are there any word changes, Malia, in the special ed piece of this, or are they just in a different order?
They're just in a different order.
So Carol, can we work on a different amendment that we delete lines 306 to 308 and approve draft 3?
Right. And that on draft 3, that would be my motion to delete
Okay.
line 306, 308, and accept draft 3.
Yeah.
That's a two-part motion essentially.
Okay.
You need a
All
second.
right.
And
Got a
could I-
second?
Second.
We got a second by Chair Huntsman. Carol, do you want to speak to your motion now?
Right. I've said most of what I wanted to say. And I'm not purporting this is from all HR directors, only from a couple, but they make the very valid point that sometimes a district, an LEA, has a specific reason for wanting to use an LEA specific license instead of helping the person to become relicensed. These people were very aware that this has become a more flexible relicensing offer, but they still felt like they wanted to have the maximum flexibility to do LEA specific or to do help a person become relicensed, and felt like there was no reason to prohibit the one if that's what the LEA felt was more helpful in a certain circumstance. And I think that the point was, I was persuaded. Malia had an excellent explanation also, but I was persuaded that giving more flexibility in licensing, if that's the direction we're going, for LEAs was the right thing to do. And again, consistent with local control.
Thank you. I think Lorraine, I've probably done something wrong. Miss Lorraine?
No, you haven't. I just want to clarify this amendment. The amendment would be to replace draft 2 with draft 3 and
Yes.
lines 306 through 308. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Miss Lorraine. I thought we were totally off base. Okay, Vice Chair Davis?
I'll speak to the amendment. What I really loved was when we had the return to licensure program for the teachers who were already licensed,
Right.
and went ahead and voted that away. Just was persuaded that we really needed to narrow down to this associate license and professional license. And then we have this LEA specific license standing over here. So I'm encouraged that I'm hearing our wonderful licensing specialist, Malia Height, say that she's working on flexibility for these licensed members who are returning to the workforce. And so I would support this motion today, and then, to fulfill the concern or resolve the concern that she is also expressing, I think we may need to come back and revisit it again and take it back out when we get to a point where we've got a great system in place for folks who have been previously licensed and readily return to the workforce.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we're going to vote on the amendment now that the board approve R 277-301 draft 3. Oh, no, that the board replace R 277-301 draft 2 with R 277-303 draft 3 and delete lines 306 through 308 of R 277-301 draft 3. That is the amendment. Do we have discussion to the amendment? Seeing none, you may vote. I see that the voting is unanimous, Vice Chair, yes? Thank you, I saw you nod. Okay, so now we're back. Yes?
Item 10.7.
Oh, wait, we have to now go to the motion. Sorry, Carol.
Oh,
We just did the amendment.
right.
So now the motion on the table is that the board approve our 277-301 draft 3 as amended. Any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, please vote. I see that the voting is unanimous. Thank you. Chair Blair?
Last item 10.7, Adult Education Policies and Procedures Guide. This was updated. We had a good discussion of the changes, and I thought it was interesting information about school fees for adult ed programs that was part of the discussion. So the committee now moves that the board approve the amended Utah Adult Education Policies and Procedures Guide.
Thank you. The motion is that the committee moves that the board approve the amended Utah Adult Education Policies and Procedures Guide. Any discussions to that motion? Seeing none, please vote. I see that the voting is unanimous. Always look for Cindy's head to nod. Thank you. Chair Lear?
That concludes our report. Thank you. It wasn't quite as swift as others, but I appreciated the extra explanations.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Lear. Okay,